Ciao guys, welcome to another episode of the Personal PR Show. And today we are here with Michael and we're going to talk about how to spot trends in your industry. Michael, we're so excited to have you here. Thank you so much for joining today.
It's a pleasure to be here, Jessica. It's wonderful.
Wow,
thank you.
Amazing. Thank you. It's still quite early in Vegas, right? In Las Vegas.
Yeah, it's 8:30 here. So yeah, we're a little bit behind you.
As I always say, when it's the afternoon here and I talk to the States and it's the morning for you guys, then I always say, I envy you guys because at this time you can still have coffee, while at this time I can only have tea.
I can't have either because then I will stay up all night. I have coffee. Yeah, I had coffee. Yeah, that I can do, but not at night.
Not at night, exactly. No, absolutely not. Okay, good, awesome. So, Michael, you just mentioned that you have a few slides. Oh my God!
Yeah, I don't want to put anybody to sleep, so I'm going to warn you. They're better than average.
Oh my God, yes, go for them. Because so what I wanted to the let's say short preface that I wanted to give is that here in Personal PR we talk a lot about thought leadership, right? And in order to be a thought leader, I firmly believe that we have to be up to date about the trends in our industry if we want to innovate in our industry, because the thought leader, the expert, is knowledgeable about that certain field. And the thought leader is knowledgeable, but then they're able to add something to the body of knowledge of that particular field. They're able to innovate, let's say, right? And in order to innovate and to create breakthrough ideas, one of the strategies that I have is actually something that I call trend jacking. And I take this from public relations. We have let's say a technique called news jacking. So basically you see what of news is getting traction in the media, and then you start producing content or pitching the media about that particular piece of news, but with your own spin, with your own angle. That is called news jacking. And I believe that in thought leadership, we should do maybe not news jacking, but certainly trend jacking. So basically we see, okay, what are the trends in our industry and how do we want to position ourselves towards these trends? So we want to go in the same direction and add in something, because we always add something as thought leader. Or do we want to go in the opposite direction and maybe, have a contrarian approach? So I firmly believe that, spotting trends in your field is super, super important for thought leadership and then, of course, for other reasons as well. So I'm super excited to have you here to talk about how to spot a trend, right? So how did you get started on this journey, by the way?
Actually, I had a startup in the .com boom days called ICONOCAST, and we were all about digital marketing. And as you well know, that has taken over completely. So we were early. And but when the .com bust happened and all these companies went out of business, a lot of it was due to what I would consider to be inaccurate forecasting of the future. So to have 325 employees work at pets.com and assume that in 2000 everyone will be buying pet food online, that's not a realistic forecast. So I decided that why don't I become a public speaker focusing on trends and innovation? And that's how I got my start. And I've been at it for that long. And, I think that it really does help open people's eyes, because I believe that, you need to skate to where the puck is going to be, not where it is today. And that is something that a lot of companies forget. And they tend to, plan for historical terms, which I think are okay in trend watching perspective, but is not good for looking at how the future will develop. So I've come up with a framework, and I'll talk about that a little bit today, that is helpful in setting a trend apart from a fad, which is what most people deal with today. When they talk about trends, a lot of people talk about fashion trends, or they're talking about financial trends, and those trends tend to be cyclical, heavily dependent on individual feelings, whereas I talk more about, what are the pervasive changes that are going to take place in permanent human behavior, because that's essentially what you really want to bank on. All right. So I was a founder of 4 startups. I've been in everything from media to CRM software to internet analytics to digital marketing, as I mentioned. Working on my 5th startup because I just don't give up, Toolhacker. And the idea here is to create innovation forward communities, ideas, incubation. So we got, like we say in Hollywood, several projects in various stages of development. All right. So, if you don't mind, I'll take you to a few slides because that always helps ground people in terms of what happens. So I'm going to share my screen here, and can you see my desktop?
Yes, I can. We can.
I'm going to get Keynote up. And where's my Keynote? Here is my Keynote. I know it's hidden down here. Okay, here we go. And we're going to spot some trends here. Okay, gotta get to that little button. So how to spot trends in your industry, absolutely critical for everyone who is either a startup, a mature business, what have you, because it is clear that we are in a world that changes at hyper warp speed. So I like to start off by answering the age-old question, how long does it take for a trend to develop? This is one of my favorite trends. This really illustrates it well. In the 800s, and we're talking a long time ago, 794 to be exact, Japanese came up with a sandal called the Zori. It was made from straw, had a strap at the top. It was very simple. Well, in 1962, a company in Sao Paulo, Brazil, came up with a Zori-like design. The company was called Alpargatas. And they launched a brand called Havaianas. But unfortunately, most Brazilians thought that Havaianas was for poor people. And as you can see, that took 1,200 years. But by 1994, as they were called chinelos de pobre, which is shoes for poor people, had become a global success. And by 2003, it was the #1 footwear in the world at 1 billion. And I know that doesn't sound like much, but remember, flip-flops are very cheaply made and are inexpensive. So, so that tells you kind of how long it can take. So 1,200 years before someone picks up the idea, 32 years to mainstream it, 9 years to become the top-selling footwear brand. So you can see a trend can take a very long time to develop. Now, this is get a little more technical, but I always like to, when I talk about trends, is I want to make sure that people understand the difference between a fad and a trend. And one of the things that happens is that a lot of us see a lot of research, and we use a thing in research called quintiles. And all it is, as it sounds, it's a fifth. So quintiles divides the markets in 5 equal segments of 20%, and that's approximate, okay? And I'll show you why. But, it goes from the left end of the spectrum, innovators and early adopters, all the way to the end, laggards and late majority, okay? You may have seen a chart from Jeffrey Moore, who became famous in 1991 with a book called Crossing the Chasm, where he showed this technology adoption curve. And in there, I laid over my innovators, early adopters, because it is essentially exactly what he was talking about. You got to get to the early majority, the late majority, because that's where the bulk of the market resides. But I tend to tell people, really the reality is it's the first 3 quintiles all the way to the early majority that are the people that you really should be targeting, because the late majority and laggards, oh, forget about it. In fact, I always joke that the laggards are really legally dead. Because they don't buy anything, they don't participate in anything, they do nothing. Nowadays, they're known as digital vegans. Those are people that don't participate in Facebook, LinkedIn, or anything like that. So that can lead to false positives. So here is a perfect example that came out of the pandemic. So you saw these surveys, 6 out of 10 Americans don't plan to return to the gym after the pandemic. This is the 3 bottom quintiles, starting with the laggards, the late majority, etc., that really technically don't participate in anything. So for them, it was easy to say, oh, we're not going to return to the gym because we don't really participate in the gym anyway. So when you see a survey like this, and there's lots of them, okay, 22% of gamers don't want, or don't want, or want to see gaming integrated with their phone, or 21% of Generation Z is lonely. That's the quintile. That's the 1/5 of the audience that wants everything, or is the 1/5 of the audience that is always lonely? So, again, this kind of, and it's quick, and I can give you a lot of examples, but I think this will help you understand how to research better, and also how to understand and interpret research that you get, because a lot of data comes across as very sensationalistic, like 38% don't think they're ever going to do this. And then when you think about it, oh, well, that's the norm. There's nothing there. The research is not telling me anything new. So I base all of this on a book I wrote back in 2019 called Uber Trends, and Uber Trends is how trends and innovation are transforming the future. And that's that framework I alluded to. So an Uber trend is a massive wave, think tsunami, that cascades through society, leaving many subtrends in its wake. Just like a tsunami does, it just destroys everything around it. And that is what makes an Uber trend so special. Because they are changing us. We are becoming different because of them. And that is the fundamental difference between an Uber trend and a regular trend. And I have 8 of them, but, I'm going to only talk about 2 today. The number one, the largest one in my book, 64 pages long, is the digital lifestyle, the marriage of man and machine. And it is really transforming us. We're becoming the computer, and the computer is becoming us. And when people tell me, oh, Michael, I don't believe that, I say, you know what? In America, we say when you get tired, we crash. and we love to multitask. And because we multitask so much, we forget more. So we need memory protection. Those are 3 core traits of the CPU, or the central processing unit of the computer. So I see a convergence happening, and that convergence is quite obvious when you look around the way we are, our techno culture, the way social media has come to dominate our lives, Zooming, and all of that stuff is all part of this digital lifestyle Uber trend. So here is a very simplistic chart, because there's a heck of a lot more that I can't even fit in here. But here are some of the sub-trend markets that you see: computers, robotics, social media, video gaming, but it's also, there's crypto, there's work from home, there's, all these trends that are being influenced by technology. And then my favorite illustration of this trend is, and I'm known around the world for, robot love. And then I always ask people, do you think we'll find robot love? Jessica, do you think we'll find robot love? Let me give you some piece of advice. Don't knock it until you try it. It's a very complex technology. It's going to take perhaps 100 years to perfect, because it's so difficult to imitate what a human does. But it gives you an inkling of what our future is like, and we're already seeing it in things that I will be talking about in a minute. And another one of my big Uber trends is time compression, the acceleration of life. I don't need to tell you, everything is going faster these days. Back in the olden days, when someone asked you, how are you feeling today? You would say, good. Now you answer, busy. It's a complete new state of mind, which has become a state of time. And time compression is, again, an age-old trend. It affects a lot of things: instant delivery, overnight delivery, multitasking, instant gratification, fast food, fast fashion. Everything is going faster these days, and we need more energy. So we drink a ton of coffee, we drink a ton of Red Bull. These are all sub-trends of the time compression Uber trend. And if you can recognize this in your planning, so making things simple to understand, because everyone is too damn busy to read, as well as I do. There is no time for anything. That is something that you need to do. And I love to show this chart because it exemplifies time compression. In 1958, the average S&P 500 company was around for 61 years. By 1980, it's 25. By 2011, it's 18. So you can tell, and that's when you speak to large companies, I always tell them, hey, you know what? Bear Stearns, Credit Suisse, I don't care how big you are, you can implode overnight. Yes. And this bank has been around for 167 years, is that correct? So if you think about that, wow, how does this happen? And that's why I always tell everybody, when the Dow Jones Index started in 1898, there were 12 companies in it. Of those 12 companies, only one is still around, and that one was uninvited from the Dow Jones Index. Wow, time compression. It makes us archaic quickly. So, Silicon Valley Bank here is a perfect example of two converging time compression trends. You've got the digital lifestyle, which fueled the run through social media, and you've got time compression, which made it happen in less than a day. $41 billion withdrawn in a day is time compression. And that's why I tell everybody you need to move more quickly these days, because as I mentioned before, we don't read, we don't have time, and these are manifestations of the time compression Uber trend. Too long, didn't read. I love when I saw this. The message is simple. Keep your emails short. I still get these long emails with 7, 8 paragraphs, and I don't believe that they understand. People just don't have time to read. So anyway, it's going to accelerate everything around us. And for startups in particular, hey, if you thought that we were moving fast before, you ain't seen nothing yet. Because when you look at the forces around the time compression storm, the internet, which accelerates the messages, the startups that are getting more money, the financing, which is, humongous, AI and machine learning, they are going to make that 18-month cycle that we like to talk about here in Silicon Valley. How about 6 months? 18 months is way too long. So that's why one of the number one topics on LinkedIn is change readiness. We got to be ready for change, and it's going to come at a faster pace than ever before. And that's why we are now looking at this whole new revolution of generative AI, with ChatGPT being the prime example, as something that in that time compression storm, if I can put in ChatGPT my company bio, my personal bio, have it write business plans for me, have it actually code. And there was just a story that went over the transom today where two entrants won a programming contest with ChatGPT coding. That's the future. So I say, here are some trends for you to sink your teeth in. This is what the world looks like today. It's going to move quickly. Please understand how to read trends correctly and understand that as people change. So for example, I have an Uber trend called Generation Ecstasy. It's all about the experience economy. People want to be entertained. They're more quickly bored. It's ennui sets in, all of that. These are things that we need to understand so that we can become much more competitive and much more attuned to what the consumer will want in the future. I hope that helps. I hope that helps.
Oh my God. Oh my God, this is amazing. This has been not only very insightful, Michael, but at the same time, very entertaining. You're super
Yeah,
entertaining.
well, I hate boring presentations, and that's why I warn everybody. I know you're gonna look at my deck and say, "Oh my goodness, I'm gonna fall asleep. I'm gonna fall asleep." No, 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 no. I do not. And by the way, I have so many jokes in my presentation, like the robot joke. So you gotta keep it entertaining, because unfortunately, a lot of this stuff, some of it is threatening to people. They do not like. I hold a mirror up to the audience and I say, you know what? You're a multitasking beast. You don't have time to read. These are things that people don't want to hear. So what I do is I try to make it more appetizing, so to speak, by giving you an amuse-bouche of a joke.
Oh my God, and you did that brilliantly. Oh my God, this has been amazing. I was like, oh, are we done already? Because
Well, it's just a quickie, because I know I don't want to bore everyone to tears, but I have 1,500 slides. In fact, as you saw the branding below, Ubertrends Academy, still sometime later this year, I'm going to launch my school, and I'm going to take you to a whole day boot camp where I'm going to I can't show you 1,500 slides, but about 1,000 in a day. And that will blow your mind.
Yes, absolutely. Let us know, please, when you have a link to this event, please let us know so that we can publish it here on Facebook and then on YouTube as well, right?
Yes,
Connected.
Yes. And please do ask me questions, because a lot of, I went through it fast, but, if there's time, I'd love to hear your thoughts on some of these trends.
Absolutely. Oh my God, I love that. So maybe I have two questions. So the first one is, how can we, because we are, so I always say that personal branding can't exist without thought leadership, right?
Right.
And
right.
It's because, personal branding is usually your story, like your origin story, your hero's journey, your values, and a couple of things, your mission and all that stuff. But I think that today it's not enough. We really want to stand out, because I'm a publicist, so I look at everything from the perspective of how can I make this visible? Right. Okay.
Yes,
by the way,
exactly.
I think that maybe we should close the presentation so that we are both.
Sorry. Yes. Stop the screen share. Yes. Let me stop.
Perfect.
No, that's
Yes.
not what I want to do. Let's stop sharing. Okay, there we go. Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah.
That's great. And okay, so basically, I believe that having a personal branding is not enough in order to be visible anymore, to stand out, to be newsworthy, and being an expert also is not enough anymore to be newsworthy. Back in the days, maybe until 8 years ago, it was still, let's say something that you could stand out with if you knew everything, if you were not knowledgeable about a certain field, right? But now everybody's an expert. Everybody's starting a business about that is based on their expertise, coaches, consultants, therapists, and so on. So I think that in order to stand out, what you have to do, one of the things that you need to do is actually to become a thought leader. And we said at the beginning that an expert knows the stuff, is knowledgeable. That is knowledgeable, but then add something to the body of knowledge of that particular field, add something to the conversation, basically innovates, right? So this and so usually in order to innovate, also I have a few ways to find your breakthrough idea, that innovation that you want to add to the body of knowledge of your field. And one of the things, as we said, is to find the trends in your field. Right. So we've talked now about Uber trends, like these trends that are basically, let's say, that are touching multiple industries and multiple fields, right? Digitalization, basically everywhere, the acceleration of time everywhere as well. But if we are to find a trend that is particularly, let's say, to be found in a particular field, in a particular industry, is there any particular way to do so, to find it, to spot it?
Oh, absolutely. So, at its fundamental level, a trend is a difference between two data points. That's the simplest way to do it, right? So find that difference between two data points, and you already have spotted a trend, right? Now, again, warning, it could be a fad. You know, it could be the trucker hat fad or something like that, that, you know, goes away quickly. But if it's something that you believe is tied to one of these 8 Uber trends of mine, I believe you're going to be pretty safe in hanging your hat on that. I know that we're inundated with data, and that you might believe that a lot of people are not going to be paying attention to certain new data points that you might introduce. But I still believe that research is leadership. And if you want to be a thought leader, in all my businesses, I have led with research. And I know it sounds boring, but whether it was MacWEEK or ICONOCAST, we did our own research studies. We commissioned them, and therefore we illustrated our unique selling proposition in a very curated fashion. And that's what I believe you, audience, still can do. You know, I think that, for example, if I were to go and establish my brand or reestablish my brand, however it may be, I would pick a particular market that exemplified some of the things I talk about. So, for example, let's take type compression. You just mentioned it. There's a pain point. The pain point is we have too much information. We're drowning in information. And one of the best studies ever done was way back in the 90s about information overload. And it was a huge British company that withdrew the data from the web, actually pulled the study from the web. And that was because they were in the information business, and they decided that maybe that's not a good study to have, that people are drowning in information. That's all we provide, Reuters. So what I would do is I would go back. I want to exploit the whole infomania. I want to know more about, you know, how stressed we are tied to it. And I want to do it in a very credible fashion. So that means a very good survey with a large enough sample size to be projectable, et cetera, and point that out in the press release so that you can say, hey, you know what? This is not one of those studies that you see that only bring out the quintile of the market, but actually shows, like, say, 75% of people are stressed due to too much information. That would be a credible data point. So that is how I would believe, if I was any startup, whether it's in an employment. I'm counseling a Las Vegas startup who has got a great job idea here. So first thing I'm going to say is employment survey, Las Vegas, what's going on? I want to know. And that attracts some eyeballs, not many maybe, because everybody's too busy, but enough to maybe get you a story here and there. So that's mine, but that's, of course, I'm kind of like, that's my warped little world I live in. So it may not be relevant for most people. The other approach would be, of course, to do a stunt that would be like what you are trying to, you know, the Ice Bucket Challenge, for example, was a huge successful PR stunt, but those are very hard to come by.
Yes, exactly. Oh my God, yes. In PR, as a matter of fact, we say that, of course, we would love to be able to create trends, but it's very, very difficult to do. And therefore, we have to be pragmatic. So we look at what is already getting traction, what trends are already getting traction, and what news. And then we kind of ride the wave of them, so to say. Exactly. So we do the jacking, the trend jacking, or the news jacking. Oh my God, but it's amazing. Wow.
Well, to that point, Jessica, we are firm believers in the retro trend. Everything is retro. The turntables are coming back. Just now, the records have outsold CDs for the very first time. So there's always a pent-up demand, especially when the world changes rapidly, for people to hanker back to the good old days. So if you're a startup and you're looking for establishing a trend, you might want to take a look at what used to happen in the olden days in your particular segment and try to bring it back. Yeah. That would not require a massive amount of creativity because, like you said, it's very difficult to start a new trend, but you take an old trend and you just recycle it, as we like to call it, the circular economy.
Yes, oh my God, it's applicable to information as well, not just to, to objects. That's so good. Oh my God, I love this. And this reminds me, I mean, it's not exactly the same thing, but it reminds me of something because let's say, de-hibernated my LinkedIn account 2 weeks ago, and now I'm producing content on LinkedIn. So I'm writing articles every single day. And one of the format, I have about, 25 content types, and I'm structuring them, not only when it comes to the editorial calendar, but also when it comes to, okay, what are the results that every single one of these content types are producing? Is it no? Is it like? Is it trust? Is it action? Like I'm creating my own model and matrix and so on.
Right.
And one of the
right.
content types that I really, really like that is, I think, very applicable to LinkedIn, maybe less to other platforms like Instagram, but very analytical, is something that is a comparison. I call it a comparison between the present and the future. So this is how we're doing things now. This is how we're probably going to do them in 10 years, for example, this particular thing. Or this could be applicable to the future, to the past as well. So, okay, this is how we used to do this 10 years ago in PR, for example, personal branding, whatever industry, right? Or 50 years ago, depending on the industry, of course, if it already existed for 50 years ago. This is how we used to do the thing 50 years ago. And this is how we're doing it today. And this is actually the perfect, I would say, context for actually relaunching a trend from back in the days, as you have just said. Maybe we say, okay, this is how we're doing things today, but this is how we used to do them 50 years ago. And we want to make the case that 50 years ago was better. And so this is a way to relaunch it. Yeah. So thank you for bringing this up.
Yeah, I think that would be good. There's a lot of candidates out there for that too. So it's easy to comment. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. And Michael, I know that we're going over time a little bit. Can you say a little bit longer, because this conversation is so juicy?
Oh, okay. Absolutely. Be happy to.
Okay.
If you have the time.
If
you have the time, I have the money.
Oh my God. Yes, because I have a meeting that was supposed to start 5 minutes ago. But to be honest, I just texted 8 minutes ago and said that I'm late. I didn't specify how late I am.
Oh, I see. Oh, okay. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. I'll take that as a compliment.
It's a big compliment, of course. Absolutely. Totally deserved compliment. And another thing that I wanted to ask you is how because you spot Uber trends, but then we know at the same time that there are some trends that go against these Uber trends. Maybe they're not as big as the Uber trend, but they're still kind of getting traction. So I'm going to make an example. So you talked about the acceleration of time compression, right? And at the same time, which is made by multiple sub-trends, for example, also digitalization. Right. And I see, I'm not directly involved in this world, but I have connections. I am exposed a little bit to the world, to the spiritual world. I'm not spiritual myself much, but I do have friends that are, hanging out in this arena. And basically it seems that they are slowing down. They are trying to slow down as much as possible. They're trying to retrieve themselves from, I don't know, the digital world, the busyness as well, and all that stuff, right? So, and I think that this trend is not as big, of course, as the time compression, but it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So whenever you spot a trend, a mega trend, an Uber trend, do you also consider the, let's say, the counter trends?
Counterbalance. Yes, absolutely. So for example, you mentioned time compression again. It is, there's countercyclical forces that are at play. So let's take yoga, for example. Yoga has exploded in popularity, has over 400 million practitioners worldwide today. It started in the early 70s. Well, actually, the Beatles made it popular in the 60s, but it has just grown exponentially, especially in the United States over time. And that is one of those. The other one would be spas, pampering, because, we need to de-stress. So there's spa market has exploded because of that. So those are the stress and relaxation techniques. Sports, of course. We have 5 million pickleball players today. I'm going to guess that the majority of those pickleball players in the US are trying to de-stress. And it's a very simple sport to pick up, and it's compact and not very costly. So there are a lot of trends that can help defray, so to speak, the postage cost of the main trend. So, for example, I have an Uber trend I don't really like to talk about much, but it's called casual living. And no, it's not a Martha Stewart trend, but it's really about the evaporation of decorum. You know, that old joke when two Brits meet and they say, we haven't been properly introduced. Stanley, I presume, you know, that kind of stuff. That is all part and parcel of the casual living Uber trend. We have seen, you know, the trolling on social media. We have had a president in the United States that exemplifies the casual living Uber trend. He is totally one, you know, people who threaten each other, road rage, air rage, all of this stuff. And I say to people, look, it's inexorable that we're going to become a society that has absolutely no manners, where people are brutally honest with each other, but usually brutally deceitful, more likely. So what can we do to fix that? I'm saying, how about the old Madame Etiquette school? Come on, we need to start it. I know it may sound silly, but you know, if the children don't learn it at home because the parents are too busy and they're both working all day long, then someone needs to step in and make up for that lack of education. So that is another example of where you can go against the trend and try to at least ameliorate some of its effects. It's not going to be 100% successful because remember the quintiles, you'll find 20% of the market will glom onto the idea, but on the opposite side of the spectrum, people are going to say, absolutely not. I love my Facebook. I want to be brain hacked. I want to be screen sucking all day long.
Oh, wow. But Michael, I have a question. So I know that you are an advisor and a consultant for companies, right? But have you ever been approached by politicians? Because Uber trends are super important for politics as well, for political campaigns too.
I have tried. So I have a ploy, and I don't know if you think I'm crazy or not, but I'm going to name myself the unofficial Chief Innovation Officer of Nevada.
Oh my God.
You know, stunt. It's a stunt. But, you know, the reality is we need one. Yeah. The politicians are not listening. They're too heavily dependent on gambling here. So we are too economy-wise, we're too monocentric. And so you need to sometimes break through that noise that you're talking about and to do something that is out of, you know, really out of whack, perhaps, but maybe gets the attention of the politicians because they are really not listening. And unfortunately, we need to change. We live in a world, and that's why I'm an innovation speaker. I have this shirt here. I call it Chuckle. You know, it's an emoji, as you can tell, and Chuckle is chuckling. And the whole idea behind this T-shirt is that you call that innovation is the hashtag, because I want to literally shame people into innovation. Shame them. Wow. And I even have stickers. I encourage my audience to put it on the CEO's office door because, as you well know, we all talk it. Right now, we have gone from 800 chief innovation officers to 14 times that amount, about 10,000. And I tell everybody, do you see 14 times the number of innovations today than in 2010? No. You don't. You just don't. And the reason for that is those people are there in name only. The company decided they needed one. They joined the trend, but they're not really doing anything. And we need to get people off their ass because we need better education. We need better government. We need better finance. We need better social media. Everything we have needs to be dramatically improved. And yet, although everyone is talking about innovation, few people are doing it. It's just like teenage sex. Everyone is talking about it. No one is doing it.
So we had on the show last week, and you were a guest on the show as well as member of the audience. Andrew is a humor engineer, would be proud of you for all of these jokes that you have.
Yeah. I was in that session, remember? And you know, see, and I tried to come up with many more. It's very difficult, but you know, I try.
Oh my God, it's so good. Oh my God, Michael, please come back to the Personal PR show.
Oh, be happy to. Be happy to.
Oh,
Yes.
that is so good. But before we close, because we know that we are, oh my God, we are 30 minutes over. But before we close, I'd like to ask you a question that I ask everybody. I mean, probably you heard it last week when we were at Drone. This is a question that I haven't asked you over the past 45 minutes, but I should have asked you.
Go ahead. What is the question I should have asked you? Do you think, well, actually, it's kind of aligned with what you asked before, and that is, do you think that your behavioral changes as portrayed due to these Uber trends are permanent?
Mm-hmm.
Is it possible that we one day will be recanting and saying, it's going to be slow food for me, it's going to be no texting? And I say, it's unlikely. Nothing is impossible. A cataclysmic event could, for example, just look at what COVID did for us, could force us into the home, not drive, not do a lot of things that we have done in the past. But barring any cataclysmic event, I do not believe that our culture is capable of dealing with a world that would be set back 40, 50 years. I say always, think about it. If I transported you back in my time machine to mid-century 1800s England, and you were hanging out with these people who read one daily New York Times newspaper in their whole lifetime, because that's what they did, you would be so impatient. You would be so, wow, you know, how archaic is this? I have no patience for it. So I think it's very difficult, but we can adapt, you know, we can make other contemporaneous changes in our lifestyle that might, you know, counterbalance that behavior. But unfortunately, things like screen sucking, they're permanent.
Yeah, they're permanent. Oh my God.
Yeah, they're permanent because, you know, we're addicted. You know, you come together with everybody. Everybody has their phone at dinner next to them on their dinner, next to their dinner plate. I mean, I tell everybody, try that tonight. Try taking your phone away from your dinner table. It ain't gonna happen. It ain't gonna happen.
It's not going to happen. So something that, you know, I know that that was supposed to be my last question, but this conversation is so addictive that I do have another question. I don't want to wait until the next video on Personal PR.
Please.
So, Michael, you just said nothing is impossible. Almost nothing is impossible. So that reminded me, when you said that, that reminded me of a question, because 2 weeks ago for International Women's Day, I was moderating a panel at Google, and the panel was about tech on one side and diversity and inclusion on the other side. So then I had this idea, because I think about my questions, you know, the next question that I will ask just 10 seconds before I ask it. And so I had this question that I think I will ask on the further panels as well. So what is something that today we would think that it's impossible, that is impossible? So that's the first part of the question. And the second part, the follow-up part is it really impossible, or is it just difficult? And I'm going to give you an example. Back in the 60s, beginning of the 60s, probably, we thought that it was impossible to bring a human on the moon. But then a few years later, we did. So it was not possible. It was not impossible. It's just difficult. Now, you are a futurist. So I'm sure that you ask yourself this question all the time. So what do you think today really seems super impossible? Like people are like, yeah, this is 100% impossible. But because you're a futurist, you know that it's not impossible. It's just difficult. Is it cyberspace?
Well, you already provided the answer. You provided the answer. You started the question with saying, I was at Women's Day. One of my Uber trends is called WAF. WAF, and it stands for the Woman's Acceptance Factor. We are moving to a female dominant society.
Oh my God.
Where women will rule.
So
And
not
it
only
will seem almost impossible because just what you just said, that seems impossible. Men have the majority of the jobs in tech. They're the majority of the CEOs, et cetera, et cetera. It is just a slow moving trend, and it is going to just take over. You can see that in the educational achievements of women versus men. You can see that in the performance on the job of men versus women. You can see that in the financial. In fact, Credit Suisse, our dearly departed bank, did a fabulous study that showed that any board that had female members, those companies performed 20% better than boards that had no female members. All of this data is out there, yet, of course, because we're ruling, we are not paying attention to it, but it's going to catch up with us. So, of course, that topic I typically reserve for women's groups only because the men are going to run me out of the room.
yeah,
So
oh
impossible, it may seem impossible today that we're going to achieve that, but we're going to land a woman on the moon first.
like that is amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. But because this is something that because on that day I moderated another panel, and the title was Vision 2030. What women must do now, must start doing now in order to achieve, let's say, a tangible taste of gender equality by 2030. Because and actually, the preface that we made for that panel, which was in the metaverse, by the way, was that statistics are saying that gender equality, I'm not saying dominance, women dominant, female dominance, I'm saying just, gender equality is going to be reached at the current pace, be reached in 140 years or 60 years, something like that. So basically,
that's super fun. I think, yeah, especially when you have ChatGPT controlled salary modeling. I think it's going to be within the next 30 years at most, but maybe even faster.
Oh
and again, look, everything is accelerating. And it is those very technologies that help us do better jobs that are going to help women achieve parity faster. And then at that point in time, when the analytics machine looks at all of the job performances of the women employed at the company and then compares them to the men, unless the men dramatically improve, because they've gotten that message loud and clear, they're going to be left behind.
Yeah, which is not nice either. I mean, we don't want to.
No, it's not. No, it's not nice either. No. And it's manifests itself, unfortunately, in violence. You've heard of these men's groups and all of this stuff that's going on online. It's vitriol. There's been a lot of incidents. But, again, a friend of mine is doing weapons training, concealed arms training in California. I mean, you're going to have to do what you have to do to protect yourself. And it is not an attractive proposition, but look, men have dominated society for ages and in very unpleasant ways. So a comeuppance is coming.
Yes. Oh my God. Wow, this has been amazing. This is a conversation that we absolutely need to continue. And by the way, how about we have a special issue of the Personal PR Show in which I bring a few women that are, let's say, advocating for gender equality, but they are, let's say, leading organizations and clubs and so on. I can bring them all.
Yeah, please do. And what I'll do is I will send you a book. Send me your snail mail and I'll FedEx you a book. You should take a look at it. It will give you a good sense because, it's 400 pages of trends. I can't possibly cover it all, but it'll give you a sense for the breadth of the topics I talk about. And that WAF trend is particularly interesting. I love the way it started. Back in the 90s, there was this online forum of men, and the woman's acceptance factor was them coming together to brainstorm ideas on how to convince their better half that they could buy that plasma TV.
Ah,
And it would not have been made possible if it wasn't for the anonymous nature of the web, because they would never, ever say that publicly, but they can say it because they're anonymous.
yes, absolutely.
Fascinating,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Anonymous research, anonymous data collection is super important. Definitely. Yeah, we want that more.
Yeah, it is.
Oh my God, Michael, this
It was a
conversation is
pleasure.
I mean, we have to continue, not only like for one more interview, but 2, 3, 4, 5. You have to be a resident guest here on the Personal PR Show. I want you here at least once a month, please.
Okay. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes.
There's so
And
much
we'll
to talk about. There's so much to share. And I do, information empowers us. So the better, more information we have, there's a Dutch saying, an informed man counts for two. Unfortunately, it's a man, but it's a Dutch saying. But it was in the old days, soldiers. The soldier was well informed, and it counts for two. So that is what it's all about. If you know how we are going to develop and why, and so that you can grok that understanding, it will help you.
Absolutely. Yes. Oh my God, I look forward to all future conversations that we will have. That is a trend that has started today, the mega trend.
Right.
Us getting together and talking at least once a month.
Okay, that sounds good. I love it.
Yeah.
Pleasure. And yeah, let's talk soon. And if there's any audience questions, just shoot them by email. I'll be happy to answer. Thank you so much.
We'll be in touch, definitely. Awesome. Thank you so much, Michael. See you soon.
Thank you, Jessica. It was a pleasure. All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
And see you soon tomorrow for the next episode of the Personal PR Show. Bye, everybody. Bye, Michael.
Bye.